So it's called the Housing Infrastructure Council. Is that right?
We are the council that is building the authority. Yes.
Oh, okay. So why was that founded, and what is the mandate of it?
Well, is founded because the federal government asked me years ago that is like First Nations need to take control of their own housing.
Mm.
How can we do this? And I was actually in Ottawa and talking about some other projects, and uh, one of the guys there from ISC found out as a building inspector, I guess, and so he started asking me all these housing questions, and it totally switched that meeting from our sustainable communities that we're going after some federal dollars for, and it went to a housing conversation there.
No.
And my friends are going, "What? How did you take over this meeting?" I was like, I don't know, but word got around, and so if you look at federally, they have legislation that ISC is going to disband themselves.
Sorry, what is ISC?
Indigenous Services Canada.
Oh, okay.
Used to be INAC a few years back.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So they've changed their name to ISC.
Uh,
So
okay.
through legislation, they're designed to disband themselves. So
Awesome.
I started up a First Nation Housing Infrastructure Council in BC, and we're the entity that's going to build the authority in BC.
Oh, I see.
So we're not going to actually run it. We're just building the authority. So and through that federal legislation, and our mandates came from the BCAFN. We've got a mandate from the BCAFN. We've got one from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. We also got one from the Summit, and we also got support from the Leadership Council,
Oh.
which is all three of the entities together. Excuse me.
That's okay.
So, yeah, and so we've got the mandates from all the chiefs in BC, and as a chief myself too, and before we even started this council, I felt we need to get all the chiefs involved because this is going to be a lot of work, and if all the other chiefs don't want to support it, there's no use us doing all this work. So we've been at it for 2 years now.
Right.
I've got some housing meetings in next couple of weeks. But federally, we've got an MOU also with the federal government to do this. And once the government changes, it doesn't matter which government comes in, but we'll continue to do our work. And as soon as the government changes, we're gonna go get an agreement in principle. That's our next avenue, AIP with the federal government.
So just from it's new to me, so I'm just trying to understand. So the funding, is this in a practical sense? What's the start and what's the end result? Is this to like for the funding for the council? Is that then going to fund projects within communities, or is it going to help plan the projects? A bit of both. What's sort of the full function of it?
Well, the full function is totally taking over ISC and putting all the First Nation services under the authority. The
Okay.
council's not running it; the authority's going to run it.
Right.
Right.
So we're building the authority,
Okay.
and what I feel our involvement is to make sure that we've done a lot of advocacy outside to all the communities throughout BC, and our mandate's going to be to make sure that everything that we've got from all the people get into the authority itself before we disband ourselves, and making sure that we can change it to something that all First Nations need in BC, and how do we make it better? How do we make the services from ISC better than what they are now?
Yeah.
Because if we're not going to make it better, what's the use of doing it?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're just changing hands to
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So what would go under this for infrastructure? Would that would schools that are built on the band and things like that? Would that go under that, or like what kind of projects goes under that?
Well, that's part of the infrastructure part, and we're still figuring out a lot of that, and how much is going to stay in Infrastructure Canada, and how much is part of ISC. So
Mm.
we're still working on that structure of it, and I know the infrastructure. I think either one thing in your reserve or everything could be part of infrastructure. So it's
Right.
hard to decipher exactly which one and define which one is right now.
Right.
But as we get into the agreement and principle and that, we'll figure it out with the federal government together, because this has never been done before. So as we got in, we thought that they were stalling us, but they've never done this either. So we're working it out together now, and we've realized that, oh, they don't know how to do this either.
Right.
So that was what the problem was. They weren't stalling us. It's just that we got to work together and figure this out together.
Yeah, and I guess this sort of sets a precedent for, because this is provincially, but that sort of sets a precedent for what potentially could be across Canada then.
Yes, every First Nation across Canada is going to be doing this eventually.
Right.
BC's just leading the way, and we're going to run into all the hiccups, and we'll make sure that everybody else knows what to do and what not to do.